They'll talk about medicine, about exercise, about keeping busy, but they never mention the silence. They never warn you that one day, the phone will stop ringing, not because people don't love you, but because they're too busy surviving their own lives. And in that quiet, something shifts. You start to wonder, is this what growing old is really about? Today, I'll show you the 6 harsh truths about loneliness that nobody dares to say out loud, but that every senior needs to hear before it's too late. There comes a strange moment in old age when the house gets too quiet. It's not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes after a good meal or a long walk. It's the hollow kind. The kind that stretches through the walls, that seeps into your bones. You sit in your chair, maybe with the TV on just for the noise, and you realize the phone hasn't rung in days. Not even a short message. And yet, your children are alive, your grandchildren are fine. That's what stings the most. Many elderly people, in their wisdom, don't complain. They say, they must be busy, and smile politely. But deep down, a question echoes. When did I become optional? It's not about needing anything material. It's about still existing in someone's thoughts. And when even birthdays are forgotten or the Sunday call becomes a once-a-month formality, that silence turns into something dangerous, a feeling of invisibility. Not just from society, but from your own family. A woman once told me, when my grandson was little, he used to call me just to tell me about his day at school. Now I see his life through photos his mother posts online. That's not just a generational gap. It's emotional abandonment masked by technology. And it's more common than we admit. The elderly don't need a parade of visitors. Sometimes, all they want is to hear a voice that still sees them as relevant. 5 minutes on the phone can be a bomb stronger than any medication. So what can be done? For some, taking the initiative helps. A simple trick: set a reminder every Sunday to call one person you miss. Don't wait for them. Share a memory, ask about their week, or even just say, I was thinking about you. That act reclaims your space in their lives. You don't have to wait to be remembered. You can remind them of how important your presence still is. Another way is writing short letters or voice notes to the younger generation. Don't wait for them to start the conversation. Teach them how. You'd be surprised how many are touched by a handwritten message or a voice full of warmth. Hi, it's your grandma. I saw something today that reminded me of you. These little things have weight, even when they don't reply. Seeds are being planted. But here's the real truth. This silence, this growing invisibility, isn't always about others forgetting. Sometimes, it's about you forgetting your power to reconnect. That shift in perspective, owning your role again, can turn that hollow quiet into meaningful solitude. Yet, as we'll soon see, the silence of family is just the first layer. There's another kind of loss that creeps in, one that doesn't come from a phone that doesn't ring, but from chairs that no one else will ever sit in again. There's a grief that doesn't wear black. It doesn't have funerals, speeches, or condolences. It happens quietly, one absence at a time. Friends who once filled the room with laughter start disappearing, not suddenly, but over the years. First, it's a phone call you keep meaning to return. Then it's someone who moved to be closer to their children. Eventually, it's a familiar voice you'll never hear again. And the hardest part? The world doesn't stop for them. But your heart feels every empty chair. For the elderly, this isn't just about missing people. It's about losing shared history. That friend who remembered when you both danced barefoot in the rain, who knew your stories without you needing to explain. When they go, something inside you goes too. It's like watching your own life fade, memory by memory, through the people who once held your past with you. Senior health isn't just physical. Emotional continuity is part of what keeps the spirit alive. I remember a man named Arthur. He was 87 and had coffee with the same 3 friends every morning for 40 years. One day, he was the last one left. He still went to the cafe, ordered the same drink, and sat at the same table. I come to remember, he told me. I talk to them in my mind. That's not weakness. That's a quiet form of strength. holding on to love even when it has no voice left. It's how the elderly teach us what true longevity of the heart looks like. But it's not easy. This slow disappearance can make you question your own timeline. You start counting your own candles a bit differently. That's why cultivating new connections matters, even when it feels unnatural. Join a reading group, a local choir, or a senior storytelling circle. You won't replace old friends, but you'll keep your emotional muscles alive. One shared laugh, even with a stranger, can bring oxygen back to a tired soul. And don't underestimate the power of memory projects. Create a friendship album. Not just photos. Write a paragraph about each one. How you met, your favorite moment, what they taught you. Share it with your children or grandchildren. You're not just preserving memories. You're showing that relationships, even when ended by time, are still alive in your story. That teaches younger generations how to carry love forward. The disappearance of companions teaches us that love doesn't always leave. It sometimes just becomes invisible. And when you start learning to live with those absences, something else begins to whisper. A different kind of emptiness. Not from who left, but from what your days have become without them. That's the soul's next quiet question. There's a danger in repetition. Not the comforting kind, like brushing your teeth or feeding your dog, but the kind where days blur together like copy-pasted pages. You wake up, make coffee, watch TV, eat, sleep. Again and again. Slowly, you begin to lose the sense of beginning, middle, and end. Time starts melting into one long, colorless stretch. This is the silent thief of vitality in old age. Not disease, not weakness, but monotony. For many elderly individuals, the loss of routine isn't about laziness, it's about loss of role. Retirement was supposed to be a reward, but instead, it stole structure. When there's no reason to dress well, leave the house, or even check the time, a kind of emotional fog sets in. The brain gets slower, not from age alone, but from lack of stimulation. Senior health is sharpened not just by walking, but by wonder. And wonder disappears when days stop surprising us. So, how do you bring purpose back? Start small. Choose one day of the week and give it a name. Adventure Tuesday, Call a Friend Thursday, or Volunteer Friday. It doesn't need to be grand, just different. On Adventure Tuesday, you might walk a different path in the park. On Call a Friend Thursday, reach out to someone you haven't spoken to in years. Simple shifts in behavior can rewire the emotional rhythm of your week. Many seniors find new fire in creative routines. Pick up painting, even if you've never held a brush. Try journaling. Write one sentence a day about what made you smile. Cook a new recipe every Saturday. Spicy lentil soup, fresh herb risotto, or even banana oat pancakes. The point isn't perfection, it's stimulation. When your brain has a reason to anticipate, it begins to hope again. And where there is hope, there is longevity. Another idea is mentoring. Offer to teach a child how to play cards, plant herbs, or tell stories from the neighborhood. Younger generations crave wisdom. They just don't always know how to ask. You can make your daily routine meaningful again by turning it into service. And nothing sharpens the soul like knowing you're still needed. A senior who teaches is a senior who grows, no matter the age. But here's the twist. Even with purpose, even with activity, there's one emotion many seniors never speak aloud. A quiet fear, hidden beneath daily habits. It's not about how the days go. It's about what they're building toward. And more often than not, it's a silence born not from boredom, but from a belief that asking for help might make you a burden. There's a sentence many elderly people carry like a shield. I don't want to be a burden. It sounds noble, even selfless. But behind that phrase often lies pain, unspoken, invisible, and unresolved. Seniors skip appointments, hide symptoms, or say, "I'm fine," with a forced smile, not because they are fine, but because they're afraid of being too much for their children or loved ones. This isn't humility. This is silent suffering. It starts with little things. A sore hip they won't mention. A sleepless night they pretend didn't happen. Then it grows. Missed meals, dizziness, forgetting medication, always brushed off with "it's nothing." Why? Because deep down, they fear becoming the topic of worry, the problem to solve. Many older adults would rather struggle alone than feel like a project on someone's to-do list. And that silence grows heavier with every passing week. But here's the truth. When you hide your pain, you also hide your humanity. You rob others of the chance to show up. Love isn't tested when things are easy. It's proven in discomfort. When you open your heart and say, "I'm scared, I need help," or even, "I don't want to be alone today," you're not burdening anyone. You're honoring the bond. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's a bridge. There's a powerful strategy I've seen work. Create a wellness pact with a trusted loved one. You agree to be honest about your needs, and they agree to check in once a week. No judgment, no fixing, just listening. If you have adult children, start with something simple like, "Can we have a coffee call every Friday? Just to catch up?" These small rituals create space for truth to breathe, slowly dismantling the fear of being too much. Also, explore safe spaces outside the family. Peer circles, group therapy, or even online forums for senior health and longevity can provide a sense of community where no one is afraid to be real. One woman once told me, "It was easier to cry with strangers who understood than to smile for my kids and pretend I wasn't scared." That insight is gold. Sometimes, healing begins in places where expectations don't exist. But the longer you carry everything in silence, the more you isolate yourself, even in a house full of people. And when the mind starts believing that being strong means being alone, it builds a wall that's hard to break. Eventually, even when surrounded by others, you feel apart. Not because no one loves you, but because they simply don't know what you're carrying. And that leads us straight into the next paradox. There's a loneliness that hits hardest not when you're alone, but when you're surrounded by people. You're in a room full of chatter, handshakes, warm lights, but none of it touches you. You smile politely, answer questions, maybe even crack a joke or two. And still, deep down, you feel like a shadow standing in someone else's life. For many in old age, this is the most painful kind of solitude, being unseen while being present. Church gatherings, birthday parties, family dinners, these should be moments of joy. But when you're the only one with gray hair, the only one moving slower, the only one whose stories feel outdated, something shifts. You become that sweet older person people greet kindly but don't truly hear. Conversations happen around you, not with you. And over time, it feels easier to stay home than to keep pretending to belong. But here's the twist. This disconnect isn't always intentional. Often, it's generational. The world moves fast. Texts, reels, slang, inside jokes that leave the elderly behind. Yet the soul still craves connection. So how do you bridge the gap? One method is storytelling. Start conversations not with advice, but with curiosity. Tell me about that app. Or, what's something new you've learned? When you become a student of the present, people make room for your past. Another technique? Host your own small circle. A tea and talk Tuesday at your home, or a monthly memory circle with neighbors. Invite 2 or 3 people, no more, so you're not drowned in noise. Share memories, listen to theirs, read poetry, play old songs. You don't need a crowd to feel connected. You need presence, and presence happens in intimacy, not volume. One senior I met started a tradition in his building called One Question Night. Every Friday, a group of residents gathered to answer just one question. What surprised you this week? It created real conversation, even among strangers. He told me, "That's when I stopped feeling invisible." See, it's not about how many people are around. It's about whether you're being seen. And to be seen, you have to show up as yourself. Still, even when we create connection, there's a sound we can't silence. A ticking clock, getting louder with each year. It's not about being ignored anymore. It's about wondering who'll notice when we're truly gone. That's the next and final truth we need to face together. There's a fear that hides behind the curtain, unspoken even in the most open conversations about old age, the fear of dying alone. It doesn't come screaming. It tiptoes in during the quietest hours of the night, when the TV is off, the house is dark, and your heartbeat feels louder than usual. You think of the friends who passed in hospital beds without anyone holding their hand, and you wonder, will I be next? This isn't drama. This is the unfiltered reality many elderly people live with. The fear isn't just about death, it's about absence at the end. No goodbyes, no final stories shared, no one to say, "You mattered." And this fear, when buried, begins to affect everything. How you trust, how you plan, even how you dream. It becomes a weight so heavy that it makes you walk slower, not because your body is tired, but because your spirit feels unfinished. The ticking of the clock becomes a countdown to invisibility. One elderly woman once told me, "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid no one will notice for days." That sentence stayed with me. It wasn't about ego, it was about legacy, about wanting to feel witnessed, even in your final breath. And that's why it matters so much to nurture connections now. Because the relationships you build in the daylight are the ones that light your way when darkness comes. There are practical ways to ease this fear. Create a final wishes letter. Not just legal, but emotional. Share your favorite memories, lessons learned, things you want to be remembered for. Give it to someone you trust. You can also record short voice notes, legacy messages, to your grandchildren, your friends, even to yourself. These actions not only prepare others, they give you peace. They remind you that your story is still yours to tell. Consider joining legacy programs or compassion circles for seniors. These groups meet weekly to reflect, share personal stories, and create a meaningful sense of closure, not as an ending, but as a celebration of life. One man, age 90, started a podcast called Tales Before I Go, and his listener base grew worldwide. He didn't fear dying anymore because he knew he'd been heard. That's the real antidote to loneliness, legacy. Yes, the clock ticks, but when you live with intention, with connection, and with expression, each tick becomes a beat in a beautiful rhythm, not a countdown. And now that we've seen all 6 truths, I ask you, what are you going to do with them? So now you've heard it. The 6 harsh truths that no one warned you about, but you felt in your bones. Not because you're weak, but because you're still deeply alive. Now tell me, which of these truths hit you the hardest? Was it the silence of your own family, the loss of lifelong friends, the weight of repetitive days, the fear of being a burden, the feeling of being invisible, or the terrifying thought of dying alone? Because if one of these made your chest tighten or your throat close up, then don't just sit with that feeling. Do something with it. Call someone right now. Write one letter. Start one ritual. Reclaim one moment of joy that belongs to you. Because this isn't just about surviving old age. It's about owning it with power, peace, and purpose. And if you want more real conversations like this, ones that go beyond cliches and tell the truth about senior health, loneliness, and longevity, then subscribe to this channel now. Hit the bell, because your story matters. And around here, we never let a good life go unnoticed.